we as a court have not read your opinion. How come you're going to read an opinion that you have not given us as a court to have the benefit of reading through to the public? Can you do this at a later date? Can you do it tomorrow? Can you? Justice Kisakye insists that she will not. The rest of the members of the court say unanimously that we shall not go and join you as you're reading something which we have not been party to.
Okay, now we come for the benefit of the listener. Are other justices entitled to know one of their colleagues' opinion before it is read? Is it law? Is it practice? Custom?
It is custom, it is not law. And actually, Justice Kisakye, when she begins reading her dissent, she begins by saying that she's not bound by that custom. She says it's not any law in Uganda that I'm bound by anyone. I can read my decision from anywhere I want it without even necessarily giving it to the members of the court. But the contention of the members of the court, they ask Justice Kisakye, Honorable Justice Kisakye, that how can we know that we're in the minority and you're in the minority? Because we might have seen things differently, and in some instances might have agreed. Because they all didn't agree that there should be costs slapped on the petitioner, because it would limit other petitioners from coming back to the court. So, establish that without reading.
How do they establish that there is a disagreement between them and her if she has not submitted her ruling to them?
In draft. Yes. As the court is seated, the other members of the public, the media is waiting for what comes out. They see the Attorney General erupting out of the Supreme Court and going. Justice Kisakye comes back and tells the media that my decision has been confiscated on the orders of the Chief Justice. She says, I'm going back to the chambers to look for my decision. She says she comes back with a photocopy. That photocopy, even the photocopy is not clear. That's why she keeps explaining to people that here I mean this, here I don't mean the other. That shows that she had not actually prepared. But then today she comes. Today she also had another scene. She's actually locked out of the Supreme Court gate. She gives an interview at the Supreme Court gate to journalists. She says, yes, judges are not supposed to be giving interviews. Yes, she has given so many. But because of the unconstitutional behavior of the Chief Justice, I'm forced to act like this. She's saying she's going to give Malema Berizi a judgment on a recusal application. But Justice Dolo had issued a judgment on Malema Berizi's matter 2 days ago. And that, in law, a recusal application is handled by the judge whose recusal is in question. And it's that judge that gives a decision, not the other members of the court. That is the Ugandan practice. So, it would be hard.
You really need them to be taught journalism. Again, you have started the story in the middle. If there was an application, you should say there was an application by so and so asking Judge XYZ to recuse themselves from the case. The judges concerned are Andrew, John, and David. They are the ones supposed to issue whether a ruling or a judgment, whether they are recusing themselves or not. I just want the listener really to get context.
So Malema Berizi walks to court, asks court that Justice Dolo is not fit to be in the Bobby Wine petition. Or when Justice
to sit on the bench in this petition.
The Chief Justice says, okay, let me listen to your case, because by judicial practice it is the person supposed to hear himself or herself, the person whose reputation is now in question. So the Chief Justice gives a decision on that matter 2 days ago. Surprisingly, today Justice Kisakye is at the Supreme Court saying that she also has a decision to give Malema Berizi, apparently because she has seen him around.
And yet, in practice, she's not supposed to issue any judgment on this matter. It is the affected judge who is supposed to recuse himself or not.
Yes. So even the other question, now context of who Justice Kisakye is. Justice Kisakye has had such controversy, especially at the Supreme Court, because she's the oldest sitting judge. She even applied to be Chief Justice with Onyi Dolo, but unfortunately...
How old is she?
I'm not sure of higher.
Okay, gentlemen, I think those are the facts of the case. We want to begin with Charles Mwangusha. What do you think of this? What do you make of it?
Well, I think if you look at it from the perspective of behavior of judges and the Supreme Court, and the digging up of Justice Kisakye's career, she's the most senior judge on the Supreme Court. She applied, like Joel said. You find quite a lot of contradictions on what should have happened. The most dramatic is actually the one on recusal is a difficult word for many people. Withdrawing. Malema Berizi's application was
withdraw yourself
because you are biased against. Yes. And the Chief Justice gave his decision. But you're playing into some kind of political drama because to say that other people cannot review my ruling. They don't change it, but they know what you're going to say. It would have been funny for other justices of the Supreme Court to sit for the camera and appear to agree. Yes, they are dissenting, but appear to endorse your views when they don't know. And they are learning them as you read out to the rest of the court.
So the normal practice is that the judges sit in a conference, share each other's judgments or rulings, so that when they go to court, they know the position of each and everyone on the bench.
Yes.
This is normal practice. I also know that it happens in practice.
The challenge with that also is that, yes, it's not by the rules of the court, it's not by law. It's not mandated. Custom. It's just custom. The challenge with that
and custom is as important as by the way
but
law.
If you read Justice Kanyehamba's autobiography, you realize that there are dangers also in that, because then comes in some cajoling. Please change. You made a mistake. What does this mean for us? And maybe she wanted to avoid that. Who knows? I am told that before some judges were disappearing out of this city to go and hide somewhere on farms so that they are not contacted, to be cajoled, to be put under pressure on their decision. But that was before the withdrawal of the case.
But in this case, she was just one among 8?
Yes.
In which case her ruling would be inconsequential.
Dissenting judgments by precedent have in some cases become very, very important.
Majority views of the court.
Pardon?
Dissenting judgments, in many cases, judges like Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg tells us, are not to say that my colleagues are wrong.
Yes.
Are to say that in the future, adopt this decision as a court.
Yes.
The court has a blind spot here. I agree. I'm in the minority, but in the future.
Yes, they become very important. And especially, not at the highest level, which is the Supreme Court. If a dissenting judgment was coming at a lower level, say Court of Appeal, Constitutional Court, sometimes you have found situations where
I am evidence of that.
Yes.
Just Tunomujuni ruled in, he was a single one on a bench of 5 in the Constitutional Court. In the case of me and Charles Obo, he's the one who ruled in our favor. But when we went to the Supreme Court, Mulenga's ruling was based on Tunomujuni's ruling. The majority ruling in the Supreme Court reflected the dissenting judgment of the Court of Appeal. Well, I want to come to you, Kwezi. What do you make of this confusion at the Supreme Court? Every single thing in Uganda always seems to have some added controversy, somebody acting out of step with what you would expect.
I think I'm the least qualified on this panel to
it's
discuss
not the legal
matters
but
judiciary.
The politics of it, yes.
But I think, it's not any different. It's extension of the same drama we see in our other two arms of government, whether it's Parliament, which takes it to the very extreme, or the conduct of the executive. So it's
that's Uganda.
Yeah, that's Uganda at its best, or you can say at its worst.
Well, that is vintage Uganda. Timothy Kalige would agree with that position.
I would, and to me the interesting bit isn't so much the details of it, but just the stage at which our judiciary has gotten to this, what you call like activism. I mean, this open case of have a press conference says that from today onwards, I'm going past the judicial spokesperson, calling the Chief Justice by name. I mean, the whole chaos within there reflects to some degree the other chaos within the NRM, especially during the primaries. So I guess all three branches of state finally are now like in sync, as an internal revolt and chaos, personal fights, ego fights and all that. We haven't yet gotten into the one between the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker in the next 2 months. So as some of us have been saying, basically this is Museveni's Obote too.
There are many institutions in Uganda historically that were shielded from this kind of public scrutiny, that were devoid of drama, exposition of their either corruption, incompetence, mismanagement, chaos. One of them was the central bank. When there was parliamentary hearings, the things that were exposed reflected. There were battles between the board of directors of the central bank and the governor. Then there were battles between the governor and the IGG. Then there were battles between... Now the Supreme Court was that last bastion where equanimity, decorum, prestige, pedigree had remained, but now with the actions of Justice Kisakye, it has also seems to be going to the dogs. Ivan Rugambo.
Yeah, I think that it's very interesting because like you said, it until yesterday, it seemed the sole remaining vestige of that kind of
Decorum.
dignity that is associated, and uniquely, and the Supreme Court and for the judiciary, that perception or that reputation is very important, because that is where it derives its legitimacy. The perception that you occupy a certain unique, elevated position that puts you in a unique position to arbitrate over matters of state and give final say on positions and all. And that is why they are limited to give interviews to the press. This is why they are not allowed to do any other job after, that's why they are shielded so much from many other things, because the idea is to protect their position. But I think, like I think Kwesi had hinted out, perhaps it is very naive of us to accept that the court could remain an island in a country where this has become this dramatic pageant for drama.
I thought KFM has remained an island of sanity, in the notion of insanity.
Where that has become the norm rather than the exception. So to have expected the Supreme Court to remain
Okay, let's listen to Obed. Give us your gloss over this.
No, not glossing over this. I think
polish it up and we see.
Our ideas are unanimous, probably like yesterday's ruling. Because I do agree with Kwesi when Kwesi was putting his very few points. He was just reading my mind. We've put politics of appeasement in every sector of managing our government, and I think this is the price we're paying. You remember, it's not only the Supreme Court. Incidentally, we say people are now on Winnie Doro, but I mean, it's almost all over. Just last year, when Honorable Anita disagreed with Honorable Rukutan on simple administrative matters.
That's 2018.
2018, yes. So instead of engaging as cabinet ministers and probably putting their matters to the prime minister and arbitrate on their simple administrative disagreements, Minister Anita was all over the press using words like mafia. We have a senior presidential advisor on media who's always calling every mafia, and you wonder, and these people stay in these positions. They are not whipped into proper discipline expected of them. So, quite alarming. And everybody will now take it like that. And Kisakye, that's why she's now free to begin addressing, just imagine, on the gate of Supreme Court. So, quite bad behavior. It didn't begin yesterday. It began sometime back. And it's all over government.
But you see, let me ask myself, perhaps we do... Judges, as far as I know, Charles, you could advise me on this, they're not even supposed to go to bars. If they have to drink, he has to drink at his home. There are certain protections they give them, which elevates their pedigree and raises them above everybody, so that when they make a judgment, people think so. If this court becomes another theater for political sloganeering and political propaganda and all this, what is likely to become of it in the eyes of the public?
I think, like everybody else has said, you see, the interesting thing is that behavior was maintained when the judges were paid very little, when they had so little in terms of benefits. Now, government has been struggling to increase their benefits, pay them more comfortably, and you see all this drama. And it's bringing out a lot of other things. It's sad that we're discussing the general malaise, knocking off one institution after the other, and now it arriving at the temple of justice, at that highest level. The question is, what do you feel about the rest of it?
But the intriguing thing, Charles, or Kwesi, is that the person who has initiated and instigated this is not a junior judge. You say this is a Johnny Kamletele, these are new people they have just put there. She is the oldest and most senior person on the bench. I would imagine that she is there for the person, perhaps the first custodian of the decorum
and customs of the court.
And customs of the court. How come that it is not the young new ones, but the oldest, most senior person doing so? I find that also quite intriguing.
But how strange is it? Because if you look at the drama in Parliament, where the MPs the other day were asking the Speaker whether it's prudent of her to preside over what was essentially a campaign, people lining up to pay tribute to her. She's been in that house for the last 30 or so years. When you question the conduct of some ministers, some of them have been in their dockets for the longest time. If you look at the conduct of ministers like General Tumwine, he's been in that parliament since maybe the last 25 or so years. So it's not about seniority. It just goes to show you the malaise that has eaten into these Ugandan institutions.
The body
Maybe they needed this kind of debasing so Ugandans can really, reconstruct something that
or this can become a
is
new normal.
built in their own image. Maybe they were trying to artificially uphold this view or version of Uganda that does not exist.
But Andrew, just to figure from Kwezi, perhaps the question should be: what's the incentive in the current state of affairs? What's the incentive to remain, that removed and prestigious? And there's very little incentive.
Or perhaps, what is the incentive for Justice Kisakye to act like this? That should be the question.
To act the way she does. You see, because first
does she plan to run for member of parliament on a NUP ticket so that she's laying a foundation?
No, I think that.
Does she hope that in taking a position like this, because Winyidolo, having been Museveni's personal lawyer, having been a cabinet minister in Museveni's government, perhaps has some credibility issues, given that the donors always like judges who dissent from many African things. She may go to the International Court of Justice or the International Criminal Court. That's how Septinda made himself. I don't know.
But this judge is probably about 70-something now. She has all the entitlements and the benefits of her position even when she's out of office, as per the law that was passed by Katurebi. The last that he presided over. So there is no really void or privilege that she probably would be chasing, grand privilege she would be chasing abroad. But I think that like I said, it is very naive of us to expect that anybody or any person or any institution or body in the country can remain an island in a theater of drama. And you look at the military. M7 is a hallowed institution. At the height of Kale's issues, we had the generals going into the press and accusing each other of things, of making insinuations before the public, and inviting the public to play arbiter or to take sides on anything. So every institution now seems to be playing to the gallery,
but beyond that,
we have run out of time. Actually, we have to take another break. When we come back, we shall be discussing the death of His Excellency President John Pombe Magufuli of Tanzania.
KFM's Hot Seat. It's hot. It's live.
John Pombe Magufuli. I want to begin now. Clockwork. I will follow the clockwork rule. Kwestabaru. Magufuli was a man of many parts. Many people praised him when he had just come to power as pragmatic, as effective in decision making. But he also suffered a lot of vilification as being dictatorial, intolerant, autocratic. Overall,
I think as a leader, he was a consequential president for that country. The first time I interacted with the Magufuli phenomenon, I was in Tanzania in November of 2015. He had just been elected in October. He had not even constituted cabinet. So there, as part of a group of, I think, students from about 8 African countries attending some conference. And at the close of the conference, there was supposed to be a Tanzanian government official to close the ceremony. But a day to the closing, one of the organizers, I think, approached me in the discussion and was telling me how they were finding it very difficult to get anyone who is anything in that Tanzanian government to come and speak at a public function, because they all felt they didn't understand what the new administration would be, and they didn't want to be on the wrong side of Magufuli. Of course, within Dar es Salaam, he had already embarked on this campaign of demolishing illegal structures in places like Kariakoo. So we visited them and we saw the demolition exercise that was going there. And I remember coming back, and I think this was in the midst of the hype, especially on social media. What would Magufuli do very many aspirational young Africans and many civil society types were lauding him, saying he's a different kind of leader, how he's a new breath on the African political scene. And my views of him then were tempered, because I felt whatever his approach was, it was always going to be met with the reality of what Tanzania was. A poor country like all the others, but although stable, which had really been eaten to the core by corruption.
Okay, we have to come to Joel. Joel, Magufuli, one of his greatest contributions was to deny that there was COVID in Tanzania, and apparently it is COVID that finally killed him.
I think so, yeah. I think he used the word apparently, but also I don't think he was a denialist. I think he disagreed on the Bano method.
No, actually, they did.
It.
Tanzania government officially and him personally announced that Tanzania was COVID-free. Trust me.
Later,
Yes.
it was
Yes.
not
Initially, he said, "Let us pray to it." Then, at a particular point last year, in around about May, he said Tanzania was COVID-free, and they stopped reporting all tests and things like that.
No, but by the time Magufuli went on bed, Magufuli had met the risen Lord, just like Saul. He had changed the narrative to prayer. Even the minister came and demonstrated what herbs you can use for COVID. So I think to that extent. But me, the wider picture I have seen that we as a country, as Uganda, need to see out of the Magufuli death is to always check the health bill of our president. It is practice elsewhere, only here that I don't see a president frequently updating us on his health bill, because I think that could be so important, and that's a problem Tanzania faced, because when Magufuli was sick and they were trying to hide everything, I remember the Prime Minister asking people that, why are you so concerned about Magufuli's health? Is he a pastor that he didn't attend Sunday service? So, for me, it's one of those moments that we get to ask our president.
So should always be telling us how his health is. Let me come to this. Honestly, I felt that Magufuli was extremely arbitrary. From the time the whole of Africa was praising him, I found his actions unbecoming of a leader. You cannot enter a hospital and observe things with the eye and fire whole management and everybody. You go by the roadside, you go to a ministry and find it. Instead of first taking time to study and understand what is happening, he was taking very arbitrary and uninformed positions. There is a company in Tanzania, many company, showed them a bill of 300 billion. Now imagine that Tanzania's revenue per year is about 7 billion. In 10 years, they would have collected 70 billion. In 30 years, they would have collected 210. In 40 years, so 300 billion would have been collected in about 50 years. How does he think that somehow any company could have a tax liability of 50 years of Tanzania's gross tax revenues?
Well,
I mean, I just could not stand the guy.
And I want to disagree with you. He had his...
I know, you Africans, you like arbitrary government, even though you insist on institutions.
Well, call it arbitrariness or whatever, but this man moved his country to a middle-income status.
Please.
The most...
By the way, can I ask you, what is middle-income status in case...
Let's not go into the economics of that one, but what I'm saying, but the most grand projects were moved because of his pragmatism, the standard gauge rail, the expansion of the airport, the flyovers and hydropower dams. Andrew, those are not exaggerations, those are real.
Let me tell you something, because we were not informed. By the time he came into government, the contractor was already on site. These are contracts that had been negotiated and discussed. Just imagine.
Contractors can be on site. We have one load, 21 kilometer stretch that has gone for almost 20 years. Contractors can be on
in Uganda, it's
but
very different because
pragmatism,
you have different land laws.
And his extreme pragmatism, especially on corruption, you can't deny him that one.
So,
and probably what you call
you would say, assuming Bob Wine had won the election and the Karuma Dam inaugurated later this year,
no, it was
then you would say Bob Wine came and built Karuma Dam.
And let me make my observation. Maybe you can dig holes in all that, but he's what you call arbitrariness. At least that's what is required of a very third world countries. If you have to follow the law and you are just third world like we are, we just remain stagnant, will not move anything.
Okay, Charles Mwangusha, we have had the opinion of so in other words, we should disregard the law. We should, as a third world country, we need arbitrary rulers, not just dictators, because many dictators follow the rules.
Magufuli was quite a controversial figure. They say he did a lot of things for Tanzania.
But which ones?
Infrastructure development, even if he built on what others had done. But what people have kind of blacked out in this glowing tribute, and right from the time he rose to power, is his extreme high-handedness in dealing with members of the opposition, in dealing with the media, in dealing with... and that was really,
Actually,
really...
that's not my criticism of him. I don't mind. Okay, I mind less how he deals with the media and the opposition, but I just mind how you run a system. A system must be run on particular rules. You cannot come...
No, I think these systems, especially in Africa, need to be jolted like Magufuli did in Tanzania.
Yes.
To get to function. I mean, we have slept...
give me an example of an institution he jolted at work. Because the little that I know is he comes into the Ministry of Energy, he finds a whole team that had been negotiating with the government of Uganda, and the government of Uganda was not moving, but they had gained a lot of experience. For him, he thinks the problem is his people. He fires the whole...
he told President Museveni to fire Doris Akol.
Yes, he fires everybody. After he has fired them, the Uganda government and Total go to negotiate, and the people who had been put there did not know anything. So the whole process ended up delaying by 1 year. The same team he had fired, the new ones tried to go to them to learn what exactly were the issues, where had we reached. And for 1 year, everything was...
Yeah, but Andrew, that was
for me...
The
I just want to be given an example that it is possible that you can jolt a system through such shock. But I want to be given
first of all, Andrew,
example.
you know very well that by the end of Kikwete's reign, first of all, the way that CCM party is entrenched and the deep state inside CCM, Kikwete was like the patron saint of that deep state in Tanzania. By the time of Kikwete's departure, the corruption and the entrenchment of the deep state was at its peak. In fact, Magufuli in his first comment says, in a press conference, says, "I have come to understand that there are some people who look around Tanzania and find there is no room to meet within Tanzania, and they have to go abroad to get a room in which to do what, in which to negotiate deals." So he comes. The first of all, that unpredictability now shakes up almost everybody. Those flyovers you're talking about, they are reversals. They are contracts he had to reverse with the Chinese, with mining companies, where he's saying these deals are mad or are crazy or what. He had to force concessions from some investors. Yeah, he had to decline banks loan requests by proposals by World Bank, and with some ridiculous terms. Or that he thought that the deep state was...
But as long as even these things are blanket, we can never get the actual... Let me give you an example of the standard gauge railway. He came and said this price is very expensive and said we have to reduce it. Those people had to reduce the alignment and the configuration of the railway, which reduced the speed by a significant margin. You get it? And therefore, what he got in terms of, you can build a train with very high initial capital expenses with very low operating costs. What he did in his change, he reduced the initial investment in the building of the railway, increased operating costs. So in the long term, actually, the Tanzanian railway is going to be very expensive. Because there is a way you align a standard gauge railway that makes it efficient and reduces the wear and tear and reduces your operational costs. So from my knowledge, in fact, the adjustments he made on the standard gauge railway reduced the capital investment but increased operating costs. In the medium term and long term, Tanzania will pay much more highly for a poor quality service you went for, because
for every project you may make a criticism on it, but they are grand projects. So, for example, that Bagamoyo port that they were going to invest, and where China is sinking this entire continent in debt. There are some ridiculous agreements or investments that he had able to pull back. My problem, just to conclude, for me, was the conservative populism, where he said the school girls cannot go or should be dismissed from school, or we have to pray against the coronavirus. We have there's certain conservative populism that I think for me was the problem I had with it.
Of course,
I always want me a specific thing that he did correct. The few that people deal with and try to find out, I find that he actually messed them up.
That's true, and of course it goes back to the whole...
Including cutting unnecessary foreign travels of civil servants and saving billions of money.
Please.
Is that also not...
Okay, things that...
But we need to know when he cut them. What was the consequence? Yes. What were those people going to do? Let me give you an example. He was saying they take a very long delegation. Me, I was a consultant on the Doha rounds. So we had to go to Doha, we had to go to Bali in Indonesia, we had to go to Cancun in Mexico, negotiating the world trade. Uganda would send a delegation of 8. the Americans will send a delegation of 7,000. Every single agreement you had to sign, they would have about 30 or 15 lawyers to negotiate every comma, every T. I realized these Africans had no capacity to participate because they're not there. You come and say, no, the delegation is too big. What do you mean it's too big? The issue is, what is that delegation supposed to go and do?
No, the
People
big
follow the top line. People follow the top line. So I want you to justify for me that this delegation was big because they were going to do shopping, demonstrate it. But many times we make criticisms of government officials going on things where they're supposed to go and do something. So all of a sudden you have Tanzania absent at international conferences where people are negotiating agreements, and even all the experts, the guy had said, don't go. Timothy Kali again.
It goes back to, I guess, the last 60, 70 years of what you call the independence era in Africa, and our failure essentially to either sustain or build a system run on laws, procedures, bureaucracy, as tiresome it seems. And of course, after the collapse of Africa in the 1970s and 80s, there comes this new hope in the mid-1990s, the beginning of the story in 1996 with a new breed of African leaders, be it a whole range of arbitrary leaders is what they are. Paul Kagame of Rwanda, Yoweri Museveni of Uganda, Isaias Afwerki Eritrea. Recently, of course, this president
Meles
Zenawi, now his successor Abiy Ahmed in Ethiopia, then Magufuli. We're always looking
Abiy
for
was
hope
not
in the
Meles'
future.
successor. There was Selassie in between.
Yes.
Haile Mariam in between.
Yes, but I mean the current. But all of them, if you notice, the Ethiopian Prime Minister and Magufuli, same story. This person who infuses energy into a despondent and discouraged society. And yes, there seems to be that initial need to shake up the system. But you see, 75% of government, like what Andrew is saying, is, whether you want it or not, run on blind, impersonal, rule-based systems with their logic, step by step, like the way you see the board of Scrabble. Each letter connects to the other and forms a logical organ. And if you try and go past that, you will have this thing that you see in Tanzania. The president doesn't go for international conferences, appears to save money, only for him to go and then, let's say, arbitrarily cancel, let's say, parts of a long-term government contract, and then what you saved in your failure to travel to international conferences is overturned by this. So essentially, what it comes down to was just the same old Idi Amin, as I say,
Snakes and ladders.
Snakes and ladders.
Concluding on Magufuli, I felt that it is good when you come and find an entrenched system that needs to be shaken, to shake that system. But you need to shake that system not on the basis of emotions, not on the basis of your anecdotal observations. It's so important for you to put in place a robust system where at least you do some minimum investigation, establish facts, and take a decision. But this idea of taking a decision based on your eye observations and feelings can be quite destructive. And I think Magufuli overall, there are positive things he may have realized in Tanzania, but I think that overall he was a bad leader for that country.
No, but these are lessons for Tanzania and for CCM. First and foremost, I think right now it's the second oldest party in Africa in terms of how many years they've served in government. They've had 6 presidents now. Nyerere had his issues, he tanked that economy. Al-Hassan Mwinyi, not so much done. Benjamin Mkapa, a lot of promise, really didn't deliver much. Kikwete, of course, will always be remembered for the corruption. But
I
Magufuli
must add that Kikwete presided over the fastest rates of growth.
equally presided over the most corrupt governments in Tanzania. But Magufuli's emergence was very important for CCM, and I think as time goes by, CCM will thank him for having arisen at the time that he did, because that system had gotten so rotten and needed to be shaken. So he was an outsider in very many ways. So is his successor, Samia Suluhu, and she's from Zanzibar, which...
Why do you think he has shaken the corruption of the system?
Because CCM had become so entrenched, they had never thought that anyone outside, the people who are within the deep state could overturn the system and change it. Magufuli, in just 5 years, managed to threaten that. And before he died, there was already talk about him running for a third term, or even possibly abolishing term limits. So
Guys,
the system, I think CCM will become will become more democratic with weaker candidates, and we may not see an arbitrary president like Magufuli. Equally, we will not see an entrenched system like the one that Kikwete presided over.
Charles Mangusha, we're editing at the East African. Perhaps you have a regional perspective. I just want to know, because he's making assertions, but I need them to prove it to me. So what did he change? What evidence is there that anyway corruption in any way, shape or form reduced?
You see,
you can threaten the corrupt and corruption takes new forms without it actually changing in substance.
I think
I don't know how you can run a system like that of Tanzania without corruption, because it's a glue that holds.
I think to understand that impact that Kwesi is talking about would require us to understand what delayed the announcement of Magufuli's passing and the behind-the-scenes negotiations to get Suluhu in the seat, because there's been a lot of jostling behind the scenes, and that will tell us the extent of the entrenchment of corruption if he was building his own cabal during his second term, and what he built over the last 5 years. And then number two is it's a bit surprising some of the decisions he took, because he was part of the state, part of the CCM from way back. So he was not like...
He was new. He came 95. In 2010.
Eh? He came in 95. He was an MP from 95.
Yes, he's been an MP from 95. He was in cabinet, so he understood the system.
But the first time he comes in cabinet is either 2010 or 29.
He had been cabinet minister for 10 years. Actually, he was minister in his first term as MP, as Minister of State for Works.
Yes. So it's somebody who had been part of the system to come and assume like you're doing everything new that you didn't know, that you're jolting the whole system, that you didn't know who are the actors. I think quite will be for historians to study. But to understand the extent of what he has been able to achieve, that jolt for me, I still think is important.
Okay. Guys, let me tell you, my limited knowledge of CCM and how it runs Tanzania. CCM is a kind of monopoly company.
Yes.
Monopoly company. You know, to get a contract to do so many things requires you to be part of the CCM system. Corruption is the glue that holds CCM together and makes it function. But I think that to renew that corruption, when people get this corruption had reached a point of getting discredited, they needed someone to come and act as if he was removing it in order to renew hope and renew faith in CCM.
And that he achieved.
But that is the only way you could reproduce and continue with corruption, because otherwise it was going since CCM. It was not, the aim was not to eliminate corruption, but to give it a new lease of life by pretending that he was acting against it. Otherwise, without corruption, CCM cannot retain power. But you can tell us what your thinking is.
Andrew, I still disagree with you, because you belong to the other school of thought of runaway capitalists. At least it's not in your new submission. That's how we've always believed. All commentaries from Tanzanians, global scholars, researchers, at this point that the man drove a huge transformative agenda for Tanzania. They all agree.
So what transformed? They all agree, but what are the specifics?
Because I can't repeat it in terms of he's left Tanzania is serious construction site. Corruption. He made at least corruption.
Extended the electricity now. I think about 80% of Tanzania. The biggest, it was around 20% or 30% of the time.
Yes, he
coverage. I think electricity coverage in Tanzania.
He constructed the biggest hydropower dam in East Africa. He made corruption a dangerous thing. You see, the most important thing is that public servants began fearing. They know if you don't lose your job, probably you'll be in prison. But what makes corruption become difficult to stamp out in countries like Uganda is because you play around with the law, with the what, and you still be in office. That's why you see this arrogant and nauseating corruption not getting checked. So over and above, I think this man, he could have. I agree with you, a bitterness. I think when we had just begun in his first term, he was in overdrive and made those mistakes you have just highlighted. But as he moved on, and that's why Tanzanians liked him. Okay. They knew what they were getting from him.
John, because I want to hear your take on your last word on Magufuli and his propensity for arbitrary government, which Africans seem to like so much.
Well, what can I say about Magufuli? I think he's a man who campaigned on a platform to redeem his people from whatever he was redeeming.
By the way, I must comment that the Tanzanian people do not agree with him, because in the last election he had literally to shoot his own opponent. He just could not get re-elected anyway.
You can't be so sure. You see the fact that the president, for example, there is a lot of state violence in the election does not mean that without violence he would not have won. In 2011, a man ran a violence-free campaign here, and he won with a significant number.
Chadema was even weaker this time. That even the chairman of the party, had to lose in his own constituency. Smaller number of MPs. So sincerely, you can't say that JPAM did not deserve his win.
You see, Andrew is very suspicious of, which is very strange because he admires a certain prototype of Magufuli.
We can discuss that, although we don't have time. PK is very different from Magufuli, to tell you. You see, President Kagame is very fast and decisive in making decisions, but he does not make arbitrary decisions. Because I think he comes from an intelligence background, he will get his guys, they investigate, establish the facts for him. Once he has his facts, he will move quickly and decisively. He does not enter a hospital and find some mistake and then orders people fired. And that's the difference between being decisive, but it is important to make informed decisions. The problem with Magufuli is I felt he made very many emotional decisions to the detriment of Tanzania. I think that in the long term, actually, Magufuli did more harm to Tanzania than good. It's possible that his arbitrariness created some good. But overall,
the jury is out, still out
if
there.
President Kagame today is, because Kagame has the benefit of having reconstructed the Rwandan state since 1995 up to now, so he's not entering something new. But if you transplanted him from his country now and brought him into a different country, he would have done things upside down.
Not on emotions, but on best of hard facts. Yes. Not on the best of feelings and emotions and anecdotal observations, but on hard facts. Okay, guys, we have run out of time. We have to end this discussion. Thank you so much, my panelists, for joining us, and our listeners. We love you. Get a kiss and we'll be right back next week on Friday with another interesting discussion. Good evening.
The hottest debate on all relevant topics. Live on KFM's Hot Seat tonight. KFM's Hot Seat covers all the relevant topics every weekday, 7 to 8 p.m. It's hot, it's live, provocative, and digs deep into the issues. It's KFM's Hot Seat, only on 933 KFM.